Nick Rustad. I'm a co-owner of CoreTactic. We're a full-service personal and career coaching firm. I'm just very briefly going to go through a simple little slide deck to explain who we are, and then I'm going to hand it over to Ruth to run through her webinar. We'll be sending this presentation out to everybody after, but just wanted to give you a little background on CoreTactic. We officially started in July of 2023 after I got laid off. And I actually hired Ruth, who you're going to see today. And Ruth worked on my resume and provided a lot of kind of help in terms of like what to do next, because I had a lot of anxiety. I just got laid off. And then I also had an amazing executive coach. And with Ruth and the executive coach, it really helped kind of reduce some of my anxiety. So I started thinking, what if I put those two people together, plus added additional services to help people as they're going through a job transition or they have a goal they want to reach. And so that's how CoreTactic was born. Our mission statement is really to make sure that we provide the best service possible to everybody, and that we're focused on an inclusivity and diversity. We want to make sure that there's equitable opportunities for all, and we want to make sure that people know how much they're valued. People sometimes really don't know. And our vision really is that companies across the country and across the world have a more diverse employee landscape. It helps to foster new ideas, different ideas, and companies right now have to innovate. We can't stay at status quo. We got to innovate to keep going, and diversity is a huge part of that. Our values at CoreTactic are honesty, integrity, compassion, professionalism, and philanthropy. I'll speak about philanthropy a little bit. So we offer pro bono sessions to veterans and also recent college grads. That's a way that we give back. And it's been wonderful talking to those folks. They have so much capability and so much, they just need a little push, a little help to get out into the workforce. CoreTactic provides, like I said earlier, a full service firm. So we can handle life coaching, career coaching, personal brand, which is what Ruth's going to talk about today, all the way over to job strategy. We also have business psychologists that can put you through a career assessment if you want to know, like, are you headed in the right direction? And then we also have placement. We work with a couple different recruiting firms that can help find you the next job. We are announcing today that we also have a referral program for new customers. If you bring us a new customer, you'll receive a $50 gift card to the store of your choice. And just to warm your brain up on today, so some statistics. What do you think, and feel free to put it in the chat, and then maybe Renee, you can list off some of the numbers, but what percentage of job seekers believe that the online job search process is time-consuming and frustrating? So throw out some ideas there. Okay, Elizabeth said 85. Any other ideas? 70, okay. So it's 61%. It's actually lower than the guesses, but that whole process is time consuming, I believe. And if you can make sure that your materials are in the right order and they're set up correctly and you worked with an expert, it can definitely reduce that frustration. Percentage of millennials that found their position through a social media site. So I found this percentage, 73% of millennials are looking on social media. So this goes to your LinkedIn profile. Your resume, cover letter, and LinkedIn profile, if they work in concert, it's really going to help you find a new job. And then next, what percentage of Fortune 500 companies use an automated tracking system for job applications? So this is called ATS. Any guesses on that? I should have let you guess on the last one. Sorry about that. I got trigger happy with my my arrows. Any guesses on percentage of companies that use ATS? 95. That's a good guess, Elizabeth, for sure. 85. Okay. 98% of Fortune 500 companies use ATS. So you need an expert to help you get your resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, and all that together so that that person can then help you get through the ATS system. That's like that first big roadblock, that quality measure that you're getting through in order to apply for a job and become a candidate. And then what percentage, oh, and I just showed you the number, I shouldn't have done that, but what percentage increase will increase the chance of actually getting a response back from a new job if you use a cover letter? And you probably saw that 40%. You need all the help you can get when you're applying for a job, especially for a job in this market. This market is very tight. It's very difficult right now. Employers tend to have the upper hand in terms of their hiring practices. And so you need to leverage all the tactics in order to get through that process. And just a final slide here. What makes CoreTactic great? We have a great team. We have a team across the country. We're not just here, we're going to do your resume for you. We're actually going to meet with you and talk to you, and we can help with a variety of things. If you need, preparation for an interview, if you just need some coaching on how to work within your current career and how to make it better, how to work with your boss, how to deal with difficult relationships, we can tackle all of those. And we have over 50,000 connections. Our team on LinkedIn has over 50,000 connections. So we can help to open doors. We can help find a mentor for you. If it's not in our network, we can find one in our extended network. And last but not least, I want to introduce Ruth. Ruth has been with me from the start of the business, and she's been instrumental in providing amazing feedback and ideas on how to run a coaching business. She works very closely with candidates, and she creates highly unique resumes, cover letters, and LinkedIn profiles because she knows that that work will add value. It'll add value to the process. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ruth.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate it. If anybody has any questions along the way, I am happy to answer them as we go through this. So we can have this as interactive as possible. I don't want you to feel like I'm just yelling at you and speaking to you. And I do speak with my hands, so you'll see them here every now and then. So we'll try to keep it as just kind of back and forth as possible, make you feel at ease. This isn't stressful. This isn't an interview that you're walking into. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. So with that, to get started, I think the biggest thing that we kind of have to address is what is personal brand and why is it important? Reason being is that a lot of people hear personal brand and they don't understand what that means, and why it is important when we're looking at job searching and how to go about it. So long story short, personal brand is kind of just why you. Why are you that person that should be hired over the next individual that comes along? It's a little bit of, sometimes when people talk to me, they're like, I can't brag on myself. And it is a little bit of that. The biggest thing is being authentic with your brand. Who are you? What is your skill set? What makes you stand out? How are your achievements? More, I don't want to say more important than the next person, but why are your achievements leveraging you into that next position? So that's kind of what, when we look at personal brand, what that is. Now, how do we figure out how to kind of create our own personal brand? A lot of it has to do with, and I always say, work with someone, whether it's a family member or you're reaching out to a career coach, sitting down and having questions be asked of you. What are your core values? What's important to you? When we look at your career, are you happy in what you're doing currently? And if you're not, what should we be doing to change that? So that's kind of, what we look at when we see personal brand, how to address it and how to kind of go about it. So I guess I'm going to open up the floor to questions, just to kind of get things moving so I don't talk the whole time on things that you may already know. Just kind of throw some questions at me and we can go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ruth, I got the first question here. What can clients expect when they work with you on their personal brand? Like, how do you approach working with a client?
So it's really dependent on every client's need because everybody's different. I do have some people that are so busy that they go, I don't have time to sit down and have sessions one-on-one going back and forth. So I've created multiple different ways of working with me, whether it be through surveys or emails, going back and forth, having conversations one-on-one like this. Sometimes I'm even meeting with individuals. It all depends on your needs and how I can best suit those. But when working with me, you're kind of, I always tell people you're stuck with me until the end. I want to make sure you're landing that position. So once we start working together, as we go through resumes, personal brand, cover letters, those types of things, if there's something that isn't working, we're going to make those changes. We're going to get you through that ATS software, because that does seem to be the biggest block when I'm talking with individuals on why they haven't landed a new position. A lot of times it is because they can't get through that ATS software. And there is a little bit of a science behind it that happens. So if we're not getting through, I always tell people, give it, just depending on the time of year and what the hiring looks like in the current markets and what industry you're in, give it 2 to 3 weeks. If you're not hearing back from interviews once you've worked with a personal brand expert, we should be making changes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Ruth, do you work with people on cleaning up their personal accounts? Do you find that that hinders people when they're looking for a job, stuff that they post personally as opposed to their brand on LinkedIn? Do you find a correlation?
So specifically to LinkedIn, I always tell people that it's great to network. It's great to have things out there, but it's not like Facebook. I always tell, I kind of draw the line in the sand of Facebook is very personal. LinkedIn is very business related. So we should be networking with individuals, opening up those doors. When we're posting a lot of things that could maybe hinder us, that's not what we want to do. So we do some cleanup on that LinkedIn, just depending. One big thing that I see a lot of times is people talking negatively about their current work environment. And that's something that we don't want to do. Whether it's a really toxic environment or not, we have to sit back and we have to take a look. Is it toxic just to you because it's not the correct situation for you, or is it a toxic environment as a whole? Because other employers looking at that may say this person is that problem versus looking at the company as a whole. So it's okay to vent. I have many vent sessions with candidates that come to me, and it's okay to do that. It's just not okay to put that out on LinkedIn, because you have the issue of other people kind of that miscommunication that can happen and taking it in a different way. So it is good to clean up, especially LinkedIn when we're looking for positions, because we don't want to hinder that at all.
Victor asked the question, how does he properly present himself to, it says clients, but I'm assuming to people that he is sending his resume to?
Yeah. So, Victor, I have a question though, because it is very specific to sometimes industry. So what industry are you currently in?
Victor might be having some issues with the mute button. We'll come back, Victor. Just post a note if you figure out the mute button and you wanna chat. Cool, awesome. I got another question here, and others feel free to put it in the chat if you have questions. What do I do, Ruth, if I've had kind of, if I've jumped around from job to job during COVID? It was really hard finding work, and then the work that I found, if I got laid off or lost a job or something during COVID, is there a way to kind of put that on the resume so you don't get a lot of questions?
Yeah. So, and COVID, that's one thing that I say in a sense of being thankful for it, because there's not as many questions that happen with employers now, because when we see those dates and those kind of jumps happen during COVID, there's less of that question of why were you jumping around, because the typical answer is going to be it was COVID during that time period. But I'm going to kind of go a little bit further than that. Is there are some people that you get into a position and you hold it for 3 months or 4 months, 5 months, whatever it is, and then you found a different position, whether that environment that you were working in was toxic or whatever it may be, and you moved on to another position and you had a few transitions happen. One way to kind of bridge that gap and not have to discuss it until you get into the interview is sometimes we put interim in that time. Sometimes we're showcased as a contractor, that you were an independent contractor during that time period. Those are a couple different ways to kind of bridge that. What it does is it allows an individual to go, okay, there's a short explanation. I want to talk to this individual further. You at least get into the interview room and then you can discuss in more depth.
Awesome. Just to get in the door and kind of help explain that.
Yeah, and that's the big thing with the resume is that you are the resume doesn't sell yourself entirely the entire time of, looking for that position. And that's what a lot of times people have that misconception that their resume is supposed to land them the position. Your resume is supposed to land you the interview. And then that's why we talk about how important interviewing is and why being very strong in your interview skills going in and having an idea of how to discuss what's on your resume is important, because that resume is there to land you that interview. It's there to get you in the door. It's not there to sell yourself the rest of the way. And this is where I find a lot of people have issues when they're running through. I get resumes that are 8 pages long because they discuss their entirety of their career. And industry standard right now, we're sitting between 1 and 2 pages. We don't want to go beyond that. Now, it is industry specific. There are some cases where there are exceptions. However, most times 90% of the resumes that you're going to be applying with are going to be 1 to 2 pages. Another question that I get sometimes on that is, what if there's white space? Can we have 1.5 pages? Absolutely, it's perfectly okay. We just don't want to go beyond 2 pages. And by doing that, we want to make sure that we're keeping between the last 15 to 20 years on your resume. We don't want to go further than that. And that will kind of shorten up those 8 pages. Sometimes people just put too much information, and it's a matter of choosing what's most important to put on that resume.
Awesome. And questions are open. If anybody has any questions, please post it in the chat. We have a resume, LinkedIn, cover letter, personal brand expert, and business coach on the line. Ruth, can you give us any tips or tricks on how to best show off your accomplishments in your resume?
Absolutely. So typically there's a couple different ways to do it, because I have people that are staying within their same industry and wanting to showcase the accomplishments. And what we want to do is we want our resume to be very metric driven. So we want to showcase numbers, percentages. When we look at sales, we're going to be looking at what is your book of business? How much are you growing that by? If we're looking at individuals that are in manufacturing or in other industries as well, looking at process improvements, productivity times, those types of things. We want to have it very metric driven. Reason being is that it really draws the eye in. When you read a job description, a lot of times you're going to see the responsibilities all laid out for you. We don't want that to be the case on your resume. We want to take those responsibilities and showcase what did we accomplish. So we're going to be showcasing those through metrics. When I have individuals that are switching industries, how to take their accomplishments and showcase that in a different light to kind of bridge the gap of why they're switching industries and why their skill set kind of transfers over. There's a couple different ways to do that. We can showcase those under a section or a header called career highlights, and showcasing why our experiences and why our achievements are leveraging us into that next position and why we can make that industry change. Another one is I don't really like using the word accomplishments on the resume. I like using it as career highlights just because we can never list all of your accomplishments. And if we're limiting that to just, 2 pages, like I just said, sometimes that can feel a little bit constricting to individuals. So we want to pull out those highlights that really showcase you in the best light.
Yeah, I like numbers. I mean, that really draws the eye. So I remember when you worked on my resume, you gave me some homework. Mm-hmm. And I had to fill in like numbers. You highlighted everything for me. So Working with Ruth is real easy. She's going to tell you exactly what she needs and where it needs to go on the resume. What is your take on cover letters?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in the beginning here when we had the statistics up that 40% is kind of driven by that cover letter when we look at positions. When people come to me and they say, do I need a cover letter? Do I not? I think a strong misconception that happens is what is a cover letter versus a resume. A lot of times when people look at cover letters, they're just regurgitating what's already on the resume, and that's not what we want to do. A resume should be very factual, very black and white. So we should have achievements listed with those metrics and numbers on there. Our cover letter, we want to be showcasing more about who we are. So it's more of a personality type thing. And I use personality, the word, very lightly because we want to look at more of you as a whole. What kind of drives you? What is your passion? What are your core values? This is where your personal brand really comes into light here, as we want to showcase what is your personal brand on that cover letter. We want to showcase to employers, why are you the person for the position that you're applying to. We want to mention the company. A lot of companies, doing a little bit of research beforehand and mentioning, are their core values aligned with yours? Why is that? Showcasing some experiences, those types of things in that cover letter are going to help leverage you into that next position. Now, if somebody's coming to me and saying the job doesn't require it, but there's an option for a cover letter, I always say throw it in there. Does it mean that the individual is going to, on the other side, that hiring manager is going to read it or not? No, but at the end of the day, you're confident in what you're putting across. You're confident that you did everything you could to make sure that you made it through. Because if there's 4 people and 3 of those don't have cover letters and yours does, chances are that hiring manager is going to go, you put in the extra effort of doing a cover letter versus those other 3 individuals. And another thing to note is that these cover letters, a lot of times people have, this idea that they have to create a separate one for everything that they do. It doesn't have to be that. What I typically tell people is that when we're creating cover letters, the bulk of that cover letter should be the same every single time you're applying to different positions. So you're not having to change it. The information that should be changed is company name. We should look at the skill set that is needed for that position, because sometimes, let's say, one job is putting a heavier focus on process improvements and another job is putting a heavier focus on cost reductions or cost savings. So we're going to change those keywords out, but it doesn't mean that the content and the majority of that cover letter should be changed. It should just be a few words. Typically, what I tell individuals is that if we can make changes that are, 5 to 7 keywords on that cover letter versus the whole bulk, that's a whole lot easier than rewriting a cover letter every single time.
Well, thank you. That makes sense.
Do you
Absolutely.
find that the cover letters, does it go through the same process as the resume where they're picking out certain words, or is that just in addition to the resume? Once they accept your resume, does the cover letter just push you further?
Cover letters typically push you further, so it's in addition to that resume. So I think this is a good spot to kind of touch on that ATS software and how it works, because I think a lot of people run into, why am I not getting through? How can I get through that software that companies are utilizing? And I'll tell you how much that it's jumped. So 2 years ago, only 82% of companies were utilizing the ATS software. Now we're at 90. I think it was 98 if I remember correctly. And yes, Nick, you kind of made a point here in the chat that ATS is applicant tracking software. So companies are utilizing this and scanning the resume, scanning the application that you're putting through, and also cover letters. It's scanning whatever's going through that system. And what it does is it's scanning it. It's scanning it against the resume. So this is why when you hear individuals talk about keywords and key phrases, it's a match. So it's a match to that job description. How closely are you in alignment to that position? I do have some people that will utilize, and this is where it gets tricky, is that there's a lot of free softwares that you can run your resume through. and you're going to come back with a poor score a lot of times, because when companies are utilizing it, it's very specific to the job that you're applying to. When you just run it through a scanning system and you type in it, let's say a job title of account manager, for example, if you go out on LinkedIn, Indeed, Career Builder, all of these different websites, and pull up different job descriptions, you're going to see tons of different job descriptions for each account manager. So it's not going to match to each one of these exactly. You're going to get a different score on every single one of these. So when you're running it through a free system, what they're doing is just kind of doing an average or a basis. And you have some job descriptions that are written very poorly and don't have a lot of information throughout them. And so you're not going to score as well as what you would as if you are tailoring it to a job description. Now, does that mean that you have to change your resume? Because I do have some people that come to me and say, I have changed my resume every single time that I'm going and applying to positions. You do not have to do this, because most times you should be able to, based off of, typically what I do is that I look at about 5 different jobs that you're interested in applying to, and we're taking the average of those 5. What are the average of keywords that are being pulled from these? What are the average key phrases that are being pulled out of these, and requirements that are needed? And we're making sure those are on the resume. So when you see resumes that have skill set and there's just words listed out, which is different than what it used to be. It used to be where we didn't have an areas of expertise or skills section on our resume. It's needed now because we're pulling in those keywords. The tricky part of ATS software is that formatting is a huge issue when we look at that software and getting our resume through. If it's not formatted correctly, your resume isn't going to parse in that ATS software correctly, so it's not going to read it. You're not going to pass. Sometimes when you look at on the internet, when we look at ATS software, what does my resume have to score at to be passing? A lot of times they say 80%. That's false. When I've done tons of hiring with different companies and interviewed and done different, I've answered questions and consulted with multiple different companies on their hiring processes. Typically, the standard is anywhere above 50%, your resume is getting looked at. Now, if they have a huge influx of resumes that are passing that 50%, sometimes they'll cut that up and they'll move it to a higher score. But that's kind of how that works as far as the ATS goes. Now, when working with someone that has access to a lot of the ATS softwares that companies are utilizing, we're able to run your resume against the jobs that you're interested in applying to make sure that those keywords and key phrases are being hit on your resume. So you're getting through that software and ultimately landing those interviews.
Is there a difference when you're working with people? Is there a difference between like an executive resume and say just your personal resume for, lower end positions or lower scaled positions?
So like an individual contributor type role?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is, and it's mostly on formatting and the information that's on it. And when I talk formatting, it depends on what we're going to be. It doesn't mean that an executive resume is going to look totally different. The information on that is going to look different. Reason being is that executives, we're going to go more in line with your accomplishments, your achievements. When we look at someone that's maybe just starting out, they don't have as many accomplishments. So we're going to be trying to pull in skill set and things in different maybe accomplishments that they did in college or things like, that they're volunteering at. We're going to be pulling that into the resume versus an executive where it's very career focused and very career driven.
Ruth, what about your volunteer experience or philanthropic, activities? Should that go on your resume? And if so, where should you put it?
Okay, so this is where there's 2 different answers for it. And I do have people that are huge into volunteering and want that experience on their resume. Did volunteering for, let's say, 20 years, but they haven't been involved in anything in the last couple years. What should they be doing is a big question that I get. And unless it pertains directly to the role, you're taking up valuable real estate that does not have to be taken up on that resume. If it's something that you want to mention, mention it more so on the cover letter versus that resume. Resumes need to be clean cut, and I always say metric driven when we're looking at it. Now, on the flip side, if you're applying to a position or a company that is very focused on volunteerism and feels that it's very important, and so do you, and it aligns with your values, that's where taking up that is valuable real estate, and that's valuable to that company, and we should be putting that on there. So there's not a hard and fast rule when it comes to it, but those are kind of the two different ways. I always, run towards the line of not putting it on there just because there should be enough other information that we're utilizing. When we think 2 pages for a resume, or 1, depending on, how we're formatting things, taking up too much space for something that isn't as, and I don't like using the word as important, but it truly is when we look at it this way. We want to make sure that we're taking up that space for other items versus that volunteerism.
Awesome. So if you just joined us, we have Ruth Tegen on. She's an expert in personal brand, and that means that she works with clients in terms of resume, cover letter, LinkedIn. She also has a service where she'll apply for jobs for you. If you're just sick of applying and you want some help from an expert to take that task on, Ruth can handle that. It's pretty awesome.
And
oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to jump in here, Nick, and I'm going to say, one thing that I think a lot of people run into when they're applying is there's 2 different things. One is mass applying. Do I mass apply to positions, or should I be very strategic in what I'm applying to? And there's no hard and fast rule here either. If you're out of work, getting your resume out there as much as possible is key. Companies aren't talking between themselves saying they applied, they applied to my role, they applied to this role. They're not doing that. Getting your resume out there is important. People, another thing, and I'm kind of traveling down a path here, we'll get to my point, but when we look at applications and looking at, all of the requirements, a lot of times people will ask me, I don't have a bachelor's degree. This position requires a bachelor's degree. In lieu of bachelor's degree, most times companies will, accept 5 to 7 years of experience in lieu of that. So you don't have to have those bachelor's degrees. People sometimes ask, should I be applying to those? Absolutely. If you feel in your heart and soul that this is a position for you and you know that you can do it, make sure your resume is in top-notch shape. Make sure your cover letter is showcasing why you are a perfect candidate for that role, and push that through. I have had more clients get hired and they don't meet all of those requirements than the people that do meet all of the requirements. And that's just part of life. The experiences that you get, that's what makes you you. That is what's important. And that's what we really need to focus on when we look at personal brand, is how to showcase you in your best light. So with that, another thing is I get a lot of frustration when people are applying to their jobs and they're saying, my resume isn't parsing correctly and this position is making me copy all of my information in. I will tell you the secret and the trick. I share this with everybody and it's kind of life-changing. So if you take anything away from today, this is what you need to take away from. And that is, when you are applying, sometimes the formatted resume, it doesn't parse correctly. So what we need to do is we need to throw it just in a simple Word doc, as how are most, softwares pulling this into, that information that you have to copy and paste over. A lot of times you start with your, name, address, location, those types of things, phone number. Then it's going to go into education, then it's going to go into experience, and you just list these out as it would be in that application on a Word document. You upload that Word document first in that resume spot, it'll all parse correctly over, you delete that document out, and you upload your PDF document for the ATS software to work from. I always say apply with PDF because there's no formatting issues. It stays in one spot. Sometimes there's companies that will require you to apply with a Word document, and that's because their ATS software isn't compatible with PDF. Otherwise, all of them should be compatible with PDF. So you should be applying with a PDF format. But to save you that copy and paste and that hours of sitting there and typing at the computer, that's what you need to do, is just throw it in. And a lot of times when I'm working with individuals, you'll get a document like that if you have issues and you come back to me and say, hey, I'm having problems applying to these positions. What can I do to save me time? That's the number one thing that I'm going to tell you and I'm going to give you, is that Word document, so it all parses correctly over and you're saving, an average of 20 minutes on your applications.
That's a great tip, Ruth. I didn't actually realize that. I've been applying, when I first started, I applied with Word, but I didn't even think about the formatting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, what about ageism? How does that affect people's chances of getting a new job? And is there any tips or tricks you have for folks that are maybe a little bit older that are applying for jobs, and how do they prevent ageism?
Yeah, so ageism is a huge issue that we run into. I know a lot of companies are going to tell you that, ageism isn't a thing. It 100% is a thing. And I try to speak as candidly and as open with people as possible. And I run into a lot of times hiring managers, they'll have interns working with them, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's not what I'm getting at here. But a lot of times those interns are going to be in that younger age range. Now, this is going to sound like opposite ageism, but I'm trying to make a point here, is that when you have experience that is now older than 20 years old, they look at that, especially when you have 1990s listed on your resume, or, I just worked with somebody last week that had 1980s still listed on the resume. You're going to get tossed to the side 100% of the time. It's just going to happen. I get the kickback of, well, I have that experience. It's important that I have the experience. And I say, yeah, it is. You are desired by companies that need that experience and need your breadth of experience and the years that you've had, but that's not what we want on the resume. Our resume is, again, just to get us into that door and get to the interview room. Then it's your job to sell yourself. Because when you walk in the room, they're going to know, like, you have multiple years of experience, but that's okay. You can sell yourself at that point. If you're getting tossed aside by the resume right off the bat, you don't even have a chance to sell yourself. And that's not what we want to do here. So ageism is 100% an issue. Now, the way to combat that on the resume is by showcasing 15 to 20 years of experience. Now, if we need to go back, I do have some people that say, hey, this job that I had, that's 24 years old, that I was doing is really, really important to this position that I'm applying to. We're going to add it on. It's not going to be your standard resume. It's not going to be the resume that you go and apply to every single job for, but it's going to be the resume that you utilize for that position itself. Going beyond, that 20 years is really going to cut your chances down. And I see this happen a lot of times, is that people will come to me and say, I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. I have all of this experience. Yeah, it's too much. We can't have that much. And a lot of times you'll see a progression in the last 20 years. How many positions did you go through? Was there, it should be a ladder type movement. We should see upwards movement. So we don't have to showcase that. Let's say, you were an analyst and you're moving into a financial manager type position and or a director level and above. We don't have to showcase that you were an analyst down at the bottom here. We've already seen that progressive movement, moving upwards. So this goes back to, addressing the personal brand and identifying what is most important to put on that resume.
Awesome. Any questions for Ruth? It's a great opportunity to talk to somebody who knows everything there is to know about resumes.
Now, Ruth, to sell yourself, do you find that when you're personally helping your own clients with the applying process and the resume process, do you find that they're getting hired more often than if they tried to do it on their own?
Absolutely. Big reason is, and a big thing that we run into is that, that ATS software, people just aren't getting through. Once their resume is transformed and moved into this new light, they're getting those calls back. They're getting those interviews that weren't happening before. And I always let everybody know that I'm working with, if you're not seeing traction on a resume that I've done for you, come back to me. It doesn't cost you anything to come back to me and say, hey, I'm not getting interviews. What's happening here? Because in the markets, we see this roller coaster happen throughout the year. It happens every year. There's different changes that happen. Companies will revamp the way they're writing their job descriptions because maybe they didn't get enough people in or whatever it is. They have a new person that wants to shed a new light on it. They want, to bring more eyes to that job description. That's going to change it. So what does that do? That changes the way that of the information that we need to put on that resume that you have. Typically, I tell people that if you're not seeing traction within 3 weeks of having a resume and putting it out there, we're going to have a conversation. Sometimes it's due to we're not aligned on the positions that you're applying to. Your resume doesn't showcase that, or you don't have enough experience. And we have a conversation that, hey, let's not apply to these types of roles. Let's look at these roles. We never want to make a backwards movement. We want to be moving upwards when we're applying to positions. So, and I do run into people that don't understand what the next upward movement is for them. Sometimes they're just making a lateral move or kind of a downward move because they're trying to get out of a toxic environment. And that's where we need to look at, why are we making the move and how can we still make an upward movement no matter how, even though we're moving. So to kind of answer your question is that, yes, absolutely. I have, and right now, numbers, I've done just under, I should say now at this point, 11,000 resumes to date. I don't want to say I've seen it all, but there's not much that surprises me anymore in the industry. And out of that, I have 86% of individuals that come back to me and say, hey, this resume worked. Now, out of the other percent, the issue that I sometimes run into is some people are just taking, just need a resume because they're doing internal hiring. I don't count those, even though they're not moving out. I want to know what the numbers are when people are moving outside of their current working environment. And sometimes I just, people are moving on and I don't hear from them until a couple years later when they say, hey, I'm making another move. Can you make an update to my resume? So those are kind of the numbers. I'm pretty proud of it when it comes to working with people. You're going to get through that ATS software. You're kind of stuck with me until the end. I do have some people, that are with me for a couple weeks and they're landing a new position. And sometimes you're with me for 12 weeks and we're landing a new position. It just depends on market during the time of year and what the industry is currently doing, what types of positions that you're looking at.
Awesome.
Do you find that certain industries hire quicker than others? Are there certain industries that maybe you have to work harder at?
Yeah, and it's really time dependent on the year for different industries, and it's not so much industry specific. It's mostly company specific. When we look at this time of year, companies tend to hire a little bit faster if they have openings, just because we're looking at the end of the year. If those positions aren't filled, sometimes they lose the budgets for those positions that aren't filled. And then at the beginning of the year, you're going to see all these positions drop off and new ones open up because we're going to have to do a revamp. So sometimes at the beginning of the year, there's this little lull that happens because companies are doing revamping of budgets, looking at, do we really need to hire for these positions because they've been open for X number of days or whatever it is. So it's not so much industry specific, it's mostly company specific because it also depends on their hiring process. Some companies are going to have very long and drawn out hiring processes that go through. I just had a client of mine go through 7 interviews to land a position, and this has been over the course of 4 months. And those are going to be a little different, and you're going to see those job openings stay open longer just because of the drawn out process. But overall, we do see a little bit of an uptick this time of year for companies that are hiring.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you kind of what's been your perspective on the job market right now, and it sounds like you're thinking that it's going to get a little bit better. I know it's pretty tight for folks right now that are applying for a bunch of jobs and they're not hearing back. Have you noticed any trends? Are you starting to see it getting a little bit better for folks?
Yeah, so I do. I do. And I haven't seen, yes, there's a lot of layoffs. I mean, when we look at the industry that happened, I mean, you can go on LinkedIn and you see tons of people that are sitting with green banners because they've been laid off or just been given the news at this time. And they're worried about what are my next steps. And they worry about how many people are out there looking for positions. And I think this is where partnering with an individual, such as myself, or professional in any aspect here, is that you're going to see better traction than if you're going at it alone. Reason being is that job markets have kind of created this very scientific way of doing things, and the way you're being taught in college is a very outdated way of applying, or how you applied 5 years ago is outdated as to now. As far as the market itself, I'm seeing very great traction for individuals that are applying to positions. Even those that are switching industries. That's another thing that sometimes we look at. They don't have as good of luck when they're if the markets are bad, and I'm not seeing that. A lot of it has to do with what does your resume look like and what is your personal brand. It's a huge reason why I see people not being hired at this time of year.
Yeah. What?
And
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, and I was going to say too, when we look at personal brand and markets this time of year, when I see people that are out and applying and trying to get through softwares and are trying to navigate layoffs and things like that, sometimes we get too heavily focused on our layoff, and we're not going, this is a great opportunity. I can look for positions that are out there. And when I have people looking for positions, they go, well, there's already 1,000 applications, let's say on LinkedIn, because sometimes LinkedIn tracks the number of applications that come in. They'll say, why am I even taking a chance and applying to this role? There's a couple of things here is that I would say you have to apply to it. You don't have to, you can choose to, but I would encourage you to choose to apply to those positions, because sometimes what happens is that we have a position in a company that we hired for a year ago, whatever, and it's open again because we're hiring for another position, another person in that role. Instead of creating a new job ad, we just open it back up. So what does that look like? It looks like all of these people applied, when really those are all old applications that were in there, but that count just keeps going up. It is frustrating for individuals looking at it. So I just tell them, don't look at those numbers. Let's not look at that part of it. Let's look at, let's look at the position itself. Is it something that you want to apply to? Go and apply to it.
Awesome. Do you have any, Ruth, do you have any success stories that you can share? I know you talked a little bit about some success stories, but curious, kind of what has been your experience? And we like those uplifting stories. So curious, if you have anything you can share.
Yeah, Nick, if you can just hang on 1 second, I didn't plug in my computer and I need to do that. So
No
just
worries.
give me 2 seconds.
Okay. Should I sing a song maybe while we wait? Oh, there's no takers on that. Okay. Oh man.
Nick, while we're waiting, there's been a lot of people that have joined later. Why don't you go over CoreTactic and explain to them the stuff that we do and what we can offer and help in addition to Ruth?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Renee. So yeah, if you've just joined us, we're meeting right now with Ruth Tegen. She's a personal brand expert. She's also an award-winning entrepreneur. She runs her own business. She's run several businesses for quite a while, and she's amazing on our team at CoreTactic. CoreTactic is a full-service personal and career coaching service. So we help people with life coaching, career coaching, resumes, job placement, business coaching. I'll be meeting with some clients this afternoon that want to start their own business, and so we'll be helping them with that. There's a link in the chat if you'd like to book some time to get to know Ruth and talk to her more about her services. But it looks like she's back online and plugged in. Okay, good.
Yeah, we're all plugged in. We're all good to go.
Okay, good. So this is our first webinar series. So in the series, and so it's we had a couple little rough bumps, but I think we're doing really well with 32 folks on the line. Awesome.
Yeah. So as you had mentioned success stories, yes, and there's a couple that always stand out to me. I worked with a individual that was 72, still in the workforce, wanted to continue on, and working with him was, very inspiring for me myself, as far as I'm like, I don't want to work when I'm 72. And here's this very strong individual that, consistently was making transitions in his career. And he's like, at this point, he wanted to make another move because he did a lot of strategic road mapping for different companies. And he was running into the roadblock of, I'm 72 and I'm not getting through the ATS software anymore. And his age was a huge factor. So we did a lot of revamping of personal brand, and that includes going on LinkedIn and showcasing the experience in the best light, but not going too old, and really amplifying what he's been doing in the last, 15 years versus taking his whole entire career and looking at it. So when we look at resumes, we want to take small chunks, and amplify your achievements in that small chunk time frame, to leverage you into that next position. So with him, we spent 6 weeks together because I also did career coaching with him. During that time, we went through, and at the end of that 6 week mark, he actually had 3 offers on the table, for 3 different companies, and 2 of those were startups. I do specialize in working with a lot of startups, just because I do a lot of contract work with them, helping with business planning and things like that. So very knowledgeable in that market. So yeah, he had three offers on the table. He ended up taking one. He's been in that for the last 2 years and still going strong. So that kind of gives you an idea of age doesn't have to be a factor. When you get to a certain point, you can continue to work. If you're capable and you have the knowledge and you have the ability, you're still able to do that. I have many people that come to me and are laid off and have been laid off, especially since COVID happened, moving back into a position that they were doing before. I have some people that took jobs that weren't even in their industry, and they run into the problem that they can't get back into what they were doing during that COVID era. And we sit down, we have conversations of, this is how we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, and how we're going to strategically place the information that you have on your resume, going, from oldest to newest, or newest to oldest. It doesn't have to be, every resume isn't going to be the same. We're going to make sure that we're showcasing your experiences to your personal, experience in the best light. And sometimes that means revamping that resume to look a little different than what is traditional. So working with those people that have been laid off and out of work, or have taken different jobs and that aren't in their industry, and moving them back into the positions, and many people. And I'm happy if anybody's, reaches out and is like, hey, I want to talk to people that you've worked with. I have many, many people that will sit down and have conversations with you about what the process is like, their experiences. I have tons of reviews out there. If you check out my LinkedIn, you can talk to any of those individuals, and they'll be happy to, have a conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, we're just wrapping up, and want to throw it out, if there's any other questions, please post it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll be getting ready to do our drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. Thanks to everybody for your participation. Okay.
And I will say, Nick, that if anybody has any questions that they want to ask after the time is up, I have time this afternoon. I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody that's on the call that wants to stay on and ask more questions. Doesn't have to end right at 1 if you don't want.
And Ruth's email address is ruth@coretactic.net if you'd like to reach out to her. You can also go to coretactic.net and purchase a service if you want to purchase her services. And just in case people are wondering the overall cost of her services. So resume work, if you'd like her to work on your resume, it's $325. If you'd like her to work on resume, LinkedIn, and cover letter, it's $500. And if you'd like her to work on resume, LinkedIn, cover letter, and apply for 10 jobs for you, it's $650. And we'll be sending that out after as well. Okay, and the drawing. Oh, okay. I'm gonna just move my mouse and get the get the right candidate here. So give me 1 second. Well, my computer's acting up now again. Okay. The drawing is going to go to Drew. So we have a Drew on the line, Drew George. You'll receive the gift card. We'll be sending you an email after the call. Thank you, everybody, for participating today, and it's been awesome. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ruth, for your time, and everybody for your questions. Everyone,
Absolutely.
everyone have a great day. Thank you so much.